Hi, it's Kirsty. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about how in OCD recovery we need to learn to be less afraid to change, to be a bit more flexible in our thinking, and to be less afraid of change happening in our life and also us changing in terms of our behaviours and our beliefs. And this links in a little bit with the backdoor spike as well. The backdoor spike being when OCD turns around and, for example, as we start to work through recovery and our anxiety surrounding our particular theme or thoughts may start to come down, we might then start to have thoughts that, well, if the anxiety comes down, that means that the thoughts and theme must be true then if I don't feel anxious about it anymore, because the anxiety was evidence that it was OCD. And against our value system. And so if we're no longer anxious about it, then perhaps we agree with it or we want it. And there's other ways that the backdoor spike can kick in also. So perhaps maybe as you start to progress again in your recovery and start going after things that you might want in your life or looking after yourself a bit better, you might start having thoughts that, for example, it might be if you start looking after your appearance a bit more, and you haven't been in a while, that's further evidence, for example, that you want to leave your partner, for example, or that you want to attract somebody from the sex that you may have an obsession with liking. For example, if your theme is around doubting your sexuality. But the backdoor spike is just another way that our brains think that they are keeping us safe with our OCD. Especially your brain might start to scream and shout as you do start to change your behaviours and you do start trying to practice having new attitudes. Your brain will scream and shout and throw other curveballs in there, which, as I said, can come in the form of the backdoor spike. Human beings generally can quite often have a resistance to change because it's the unknown, it's the uncertainty. And as we practice working through our OCD recovering, practicing developing these new skills of tolerance, of uncertainty and acceptance, we're likely to come across a great deal of resistance from our minds, throwing out new thoughts and themes to keep us safe, which will stop us in our tracks as we push through our exposures and we take risks in our life and we take on more responsibility, etc. But some of the things that some of us need to practice in our recovery are things that you wouldn't even think about, and you start to realise as you go through what other irrational beliefs that you've held through your life because they're societal beliefs. For example, the idea of being selfish. As if you are somebody who has suffered a great deal from OCD and you need to push through recovery, there will be a degree of, well, in fact, not even a degree, it's highly important that you put your recovery first alongside the rest of your life, but your recovery needs to take priority. And in which case it means maybe practicing saying no to people a bit more. If you're anything like me, you may have previously overcommitted yourself with things, said yes to too many things, jumped in to fill silences, basically all forms of being a bit of a people pleaser, and you start to realise that you can't necessarily do all of that while you're working through your OCD recovery. And as you start to practice unconditional self-acceptance, you start to see a little bit more of the things you do and don't want in your life, and you start to self-reference a lot more and stop the reference of other people's thoughts and opinions, which means that you start to act more in favour of your own happiness and maybe a little bit less in other people's happiness. And when I say other people's happiness, I don't necessarily mean like your children, for example, but I mean, you know, friends and family, for example. You start to maybe please yourself a bit more. And as you do this, you might start to think it's wrong and that you're being selfish, and being selfish is really bad. But then you realise that actually a lot of other people act in their own best interest all the time. And once you've had a taste of it, you might start to think, actually, this is quite pleasing to me. I've got a bit more time to work on myself. And it's kind of getting to the point where you can accept, yeah, okay, I'm being a bit selfish today. I need to be. I've suffered for a long time, and quite frankly, I've had enough, and I want to do what's best for me now. Your mind might not always like it, and it might throw out that thoughts about people not wanting to be your friend anymore, that you're upsetting them. But at the end of the day, you're probably overestimating your own self-importance anyway when you're worrying about that kind of thing. But also, if other people don't like it, so, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? So be it. If people aren't willing to stand by you in this journey, then maybe they don't deserve to. So it's things like this that I mean, that don't be afraid to change in yourself as you start to change your attitudes about yourself and your beliefs in yourself. Your OCD will jump on that most likely, but it's still a case of challenging those beliefs. If you think it's wrong to be selfish, why? And perhaps as you continue with self-referencing more about what you want, and you start believing in yourself a bit more, it might be, again, if you're anything like me, you might start having thoughts about, oh, am I being arrogant? It's terrible to be arrogant and all of that. So then it's like, okay, this is an unconditional self-acceptance, and I need to practice a bit more of that. Those of us working through our OCD recovery journey will know that we have to practice an acceptance of ourselves and others for quite extreme things that we never would have even thought about. Things that people who don't have OCD would be absolutely horrified about. And again, sometimes we may be afraid to practice acceptance of these and change our beliefs and change our behaviours and just change overall about these things, because we might be afraid of becoming them. And again, that's kind of another way of the backdoor spike getting in there as well. It's saying that if you work towards accepting this, that means that you'll become it, or it's bad, or whatever. It's being afraid of changing, or because of what you might become or what your life might become. So it's, like I said, it's the acceptance of uncertainty as well. For example, it's looking at when we work through how can we accept other people, say for like famous serial killers, we start to try and look at it from their perspective. For example, when we see maybe if they've been abused as a child and things, and it's useful for us to practice where we can, learning to have compassion for some of these people in a way. We don't have to like what they've done, absolutely not, but to be able to accept them as a person. It helps to learn compassion and a bit of understanding that there's something not right in the brain there, really. But they didn't choose those brains, same as we didn't choose to have a brain riddled with OCD. But the thing is that you sometimes it's very daunting when you first look at these things. You want to practice having compassion for in these people, because you're afraid of what that will mean for you and what people will think of you. The thing is, though, with this, it's kind of extreme acceptance there that helps us with our OCD, because it gives our OCD less things to catch us out on, to be able to achieve that level of flexible thinking. We don't always need to discuss it with everybody else outside of OCD, because they don't have to do the things that we do. They will suffer maybe in other ways in life if they don't have a degree of acceptance of themselves and of life and of others. But they don't have to go as far as we might do sometimes in terms of finding compassion. And we don't have to discuss it with them. We're doing what's right for us on our own journey. to make sure that we are as flexible as we can be in order to help us help reduce our chances of getting stuck on new other themes that might come about. But as I said, our minds will quite often put up resistance to this because it's new, it's a new way of thinking. This is new and it can be scary, and our brains will throw up a lot of resistance to it. But the key here is to keep pushing through and doing what's right for you, because it's the right thing for you and your circumstances and your situation as somebody who has OCD. I hope this video has been helpful to anybody who is struggling a little bit with kind of our OCD throwing up resistance to us working on what we need to work on for recovery, and making like backdoor spike-esque suggestions to us that if there's no anxiety it means this, and if we're willing to believe this then it means this about us, and if we're going to be so selfish then people won't like us anymore, and all of that. We need to take these risks and do what's right for us. And if our minds are throwing out these things, then that is just further you can do further information gathering about yourself and the fears that you do hold, and you can work on them and disputing them and looking at the irrationalities behind them as you work through it. But thank you very much for watching. Bye.